So we're here with the Fortify Your Data podcast. I have the founders of SeeLife. I'm just going to let you guys take it away, introduce yourselves, kind of feed into what you originally did and what led you to starting this company.
Yeah, thank you for having us. So my name's Erika Woodrum. I'm the CEO of SeeLife, and this is my brother, Scott, co-founder. So SeeLife is a mobile game played on a tablet, and it's meant to teach children how to control their heart rate. Mm-hmm. So it's an underwater adventure game, and the heart rate's taken from a Fitbit or other wearable, and the visuals of the game change to reflect the heart rate, allowing the player to see it and therefore learn how to control it. So it's based in this biofeedback science. And if you're not familiar with biofeedback, the quick idea behind it is that you can't learn anything without feedback. That's why someone who's deaf speaks that muffled tone. It's not their ability to speak that's limited, it's their ability for the feedback and to learn how to speak properly. So biofeedback is just getting feedback from your biosignals and learning how to control them. So Scott and I actually went through biofeedback when we were younger for overactive brain waves, which are really commonly manifested in anxiety, ADHD, and in my case it was Tourette's. So that was very boring. I can get more into traditional biofeedback.
It was pretty boring.
Okay.
And so if you practice heart rate biofeedback, it's more used for a general audience, not just like a specific problem, because the outcome is essentially just learning how to overcome your nerves. And
so, like, just to stop you there, give me an example of like what that biofeadback looked like when you guys were going through it.
Yeah, so I mean, I would literally sit in a room, dark room.
Okay.
They would hook up little wires to your brain, your head, and you would watch your brain waves for 45 minutes.
And what would you do in the room, though?
You'd look at a blinking light.
You'd sit there and you'd literally, so there'd be like two lines, and you'd watch your brain waves go in between the lines, and they would tell you, like, for as long as you can, keep the line, like the brain waves in between the lines. And there's a little score in the top right corner, and it was just crazy boring.
Okay, interesting.
And as a 9-year-old doing that for 45 minutes several times a week for months on end, I did it because my Tourette's weren't great. You'll still see my tics from time to time. Like I'll blink funny or like my head will twitch a little bit. But unless I told you, you wouldn't know. Mm-hmm. However, when I was 9, I did these head jerks that were just like really, really...
Getting like whiplash? And,
I would get these terrible headaches, and the worse the headaches would get, the worse my tics would get. And it was just this vicious cycle. I had another one where I like spit. I mean, it was just something that it gave me enough motivation to go through this boring thing because I really wanted to get over these headaches and these just interruptions, right? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't allowing me to perform. So that was my motivation. Mm-hmm. If you tell a 9-year-old, we're going to teach you how to control your heart rate so that you don't get nervous when you go to take a test, that's not going to resonate with them.
Yeah.
So you need a different way to make that engaging. And so the motivation to get a kid to practice heart rate biofeedback is to make it into a game.
And that is what you've created, kind of out your own personal struggles with boredom and biofeedback.
Exactly.
So walk me through what SeeLife looks like when you're doing that. Still in a dark room by yourself, but now you have SeeLife?
No. Now it's just like any other mobile app game you would play. So if you want to download Candy Crush or any of those other games you see kids playing all the time, same kind of thing, except you'd wear a Fitbit is the only additional hardware. And it's played on a tablet or a phone, and we've designed a lot of elements into the game to lead kids to their own conclusion. So one of the things is it's played on a mobile tablet and not a computer, so that you have to sit still. So if you're sitting on a computer and a kid, like with the play testing, what were they doing?
I mean, one kid fell out of the chair.
Okay.
I mean,
we were playing on a laptop.
Just in general, if they're not using a tablet, they'll just, they're kids. They're
sure.
hang off the chair, they're going to stand on the chair, they're going to be sitting there and just slapping on the keyboard trying to make the game work. But if they're using a tablet, so we did it in the same day with the game on a computer and on a tablet, and then they're sitting there like, very calmly trying to control the game. It works.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a fish, and you tilt the tablet to swim like around obstacles and collecting coins, and then if your heart rate goes up, the game gets darker and the fish gets sad, and so you're playing on empathy of kids. And
Okay.
then there's like other incentives we've built in. You kind of have to find along the way. Like if your heart rate is calm for a certain amount of time, you get a bonus treasure chest. And so, and we're building in this story to sort of help kids travel through the reasons and why you can keep calm. And we worked with child psychologists to develop the language of the game, so the way the main character talks to the player is very age appropriate, because we are targeting first grade for our pilot study, but SeeLife 1.0 will be more K to 5th. But for right now, the MVP is really first grade, and that language is surprisingly difficult to get right.
In like what way?
So one of the things I was told when I'm talking to child psychologists is you can't make false promises. So like if you are caught by an obstacle and you have to start the level over, you have to be really careful for the game not to say something like, you'll do better next time, to encourage them to play again, because what if they don't? It's actually going to frustrate them. So we had to be really careful when designing all the language to say things like, would you like to try again? That's okay. You know, maybe let's take a deep breath, and would you like to help me again? So just being really careful with all of that language.
And even like the coaching techniques that, you know, the game is obviously going to be trying to instill into the kids is also has to be in a way that's going to make them not really think I'm learning something and I'm meditating or whatever it is. It's got to be like, oh, I want to do this. I want to stay calm because I want the fish to be calm and happy and like see clear. So as opposed to, why don't you take a deep breath? You're freaking out right now.
Yeah.
Calm down.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you tell anyone to calm down.
Yeah, they don't.
They don't calm down.
That's some of the least calming phrases I can think of.
Yeah, calm down.
So just to really get this visual in, so when you're bringing this in, you're marketing this to schools. You're marketing this towards basically anyone that's really interfacing with kids. So maybe some like I know a nonprofit, Achievement Centers for Children, that's in the area. They work with a lot of kids that have anything ranging from mild autism to severe special needs.
Sure.
That might be a good play. When you go to these, we'll just call them schools for now. Are you giving them the tablets, or are you giving them software for the tablets? How does that look right now?
So while we're playtesting right now, I mean, there's a few different like implementation methods that we're testing, but so far we have gone in and we've sort of tested it like once a week. So we find a time that, you know, whatever classroom it is that we're testing, we tell the kids, hey, you're going to be professional game designers. And we go in there, and once a week we take a couple kids and we play with them. But we also want to have a method where we just completely step back and let the teachers do everything, and then they're going to report to us. And then also we want to, you know, be hands-on 100% of the time. So one-on-one with every kid all the time. Because, I mean, there's several goals to playtesting, obviously. We want to make sure the game's engaging, but we also want to make sure that we don't need to necessarily be there all the time. So there's like different things we're learning with each way that we're going through things right now.
Yeah.
So and with each of those methods, for now, yes, supplying our own tablet, because it only works on this very specific hardware that we're building it on. As far as the APK files go, the software, you could download it on Apple or Android, but it's still the MVP, so the screen ratio might be different on yours or mine.
Right.
So I'm going to give you my tablet that I know works beautiful and
mitigating bugs, right?
Yeah. And then as far as the hardware goes, right now it has to be on a Fitbit Versa.
Okay.
And the chances of a kid having a Fitbit Versa in a school are very limited, even in the long run. So yes, for the MVP for testing for the next 4 months at least, we are providing all of the hardware, Fitbit and tablet for any tester. Yeah. In the future going on, it kind of depends on what the schools have on hand. And it's looking like a lot of schools have a 1-to-1 ratio of tablets to students. But the Fitbit side of things, not so much. So we're thinking of building a kit or a cart and customizing it to each school. So if they don't have tablets on hand, we can build into the model, 10 tablets and 10 Fitbits and a little charging station and something they can move from classroom to classroom so that they have the hardware as they need it.
Yeah. So, and the reason why I ask is because it's an interesting dilemma for software companies, especially software startups, and how people will be able to access their software. So, for example, Dan Sosek from Rec Prep, who was here last week, has software that basically has to exist on the medical company's hardware. Like, it's implied they have a server that's running on like Windows, right? Like a Windows server, which is sometimes an implication, right? And it's just interesting how you guys, think that through. Because on one hand, you're a software company. But on the other hand, you're also trying to fill a very specific need for a very specific audience, and that audience being schools isn't always the most funded, right?
Right. So in that regard, we are talking to Fitbit and saying, if Fitbit is the hardware stack we decide to go with. And right now the answer is maybe. We're looking at in development a lot of different capabilities of the Fitbit and if it can do what we want it to. But if Fitbit does work out and is able to read the heart rate and work the way we want to, then we would talk about doing like a bulk discount order and again supplying the school with what they need, a small kit. So it's not like you need to supply the school with a 1-to-1 ratio. It really is just like something you can move to a classroom and have a few kids do at a time, and, which makes it manageable.
Easier too to kind of digest for them. So now as far as like SeeLife goes, when did you guys get this idea, or when did you guys, obviously you guys have been kind of going through, at least this kind of technology your whole lives. But when did you sit down and say, I'm starting a company?
Well, what's funny is that the idea came, and I wasn't thinking about a company at all. So I went to the Cleveland Institute of Art to study biomedical art and also with an emphasis in educational game design. And for our thesis project, it's one of the only undergraduate schools that makes you do a thesis. And at the time, I was like not happy about it because it was a lot of work. But the idea of the thesis is you find a problem and you develop a solution using what you have learned the past 3 years at CIA. And so my project was SeeLife. And so I animated and unknowingly created a vertical slice of a game. And I made the wireframe and I did all of the research. And what's really great about it is the time I was not thinking about making money. There was nothing involved as far as business sense. It was just what is the best solution based on as much research as possible for a product that I can create that would be a solution to some sort of problem. And so I designed SeeLife, and I had a committee of child psychologists and game designers from Unity and faculty around CIA. And I was living at home at the time, so Scott was helping me figure out the game design. I'd go home and talk about just the story and how to keep kids engaged and everything. And so I did all of that back in 2014. And then I graduated and was like, great, I graduated. Kind of done with it. And then 2 years later, was it 2 years later?
It might have been like 3 or 4 years later even. It was about 2 years ago now, I think, that you went to Startup Scale Up.
Yeah, so I'd always been talking about it, just kind of, you mentioned, I did this thesis project, and I work in research at the VA, and just through talking to people and starting to understand how people take an idea to commercialization, I was kind of like, oh, maybe that's a good idea. I don't know. We'll see. Let's look into that. So I went to Startup Scale Up through Jumpstart and ended up applying and getting a mentor and going through some customer validation classes. They got me connected to an EIR, and I went through iCore down at Bounce Hub right before it was a Bounce Hub. It was changing. And it was through iCore that 7 weeks where I was like, this is a really good time. Like there's this change going on, so I needed help. I validated that there was a market for it, figured out my value proposition, and I knew nothing about starting a business. Scott just came from a startup, and I was like, this seems like a really good time. And then we learned about, through the interviews, something called social emotional learning, which is why we decided to start selling to schools. So that's kind of how I started and brought Scott in.
Yeah. And I guess back to something that you were talking about earlier of like selling to schools and like all these other different pathways to customers. I mean, we've certainly identified like different pathways. Ultimately, like sports and older kids, adults even. But one thing we've learned, I think, through mentors and just talking to people is when you're at this stage, you have to like focus on one pathway.
Yeah. So and that pathway is schools right now.
Right. Yeah. We've identified that as being like an awesome pathway right now because of the timing that you were just mentioning. I mean, there is like a cultural shift going on, across the entire country that is, focusing on this social emotional like mindfulness movement. And in fact, they're like implementing a new learning domain in schools right now, saying that schools have to place an equal amount of emphasis on social emotional learning. So they're actually like seeking solutions for it. Right. So right now, there's an opportunity for us to like actually go to schools and say, hey, here's something that is measurable and on something that's very difficult to measure. I mean, when schools are going in and saying, we're
how emotionally intelligent are you?
Yeah, we have kids meditating.
How do you even quantify that, right?
Exactly.
But we can in a sense.
Kind of, yeah. So there's actual like measurable data that they can show the state and saying, hey, we are doing something. So there's been a lot of traction in that sense. And, you know, ultimately there's definitely other pathways to the customer that we see, such as like parents and, you know.
It's like sports psychologists.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 30 I feel like that we've listed out.
Okay.
But our primary focus for the time being is schools because of the timing right now.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, obviously it also helps us like with a more general audience. Because right now I think people that are seeking like biofeedback therapy are people that are looking to solve a problem in a way. And when you're doing heart rate biofeedback, it really is for like a general audience. So like if you like learn how to control your heart rate, any kid could benefit. I mean, socializing, and then like she mentioned, taking tests, and it'll actually like roll into other things that our other markets would.
Yeah, I think I know many adults that would benefit from it as well.
Yeah, for sure. So you know.
So like, what is the industry of biofeedback look like? Are there a lot of people in that space? Are there a lot of companies really looking at it? Are they usually bigger labs? Are there a lot of startups? What is that?
It's mostly clinical private practice.
Okay.
So certified biofeedback specialist would be small private practice type thing. There are a small handful of companies that have commercialized biofeedback take-home systems. Most of them are for adults because they're really in the meditation space. Like if you look at Unite or like PIP is another one, but they either like aren't game design, they're strictly biofeedback, or they're just very like meditation. They don't have that storyline as much.
So they're like
focused.
They're like the dark room companies, basically. We're talking about an industry I know nothing about. Sometimes you have to draw it in crayon on construction
and
paper.
Sometimes they have like decent visuals. You know,
Yeah.
It's not so much a blinking light on a screen or two lines. It'll be like, you know, you're sitting on a raft or there's a sunset, and the sunset, like it's better visuals than what we went through, but it's still not something you're gonna get a kid to focus on. It still just says take a deep breath, calm down, count to 10, like something we'd want a kid to do before they fall asleep, not necessarily just play for, you know, 15 minutes a day every day because they want to and it's their choice. And then there's another one out there that's really cool called the Nevermind game, 18 and older, because it's kind of scary. Like it's really scary. So we've played it, and that one's really cool. It's the same kind of thing where it's a game you can download on your desktop, and so if adults are looking for a biofeedback solution, there are solutions that exist, and we love that we have that competition because that means that the space is growing. And Nevermind came out, I think, in 2015, and has built a lot of traction since then, which is exciting, but again, not for kids. The main biofeedback game on the market that is for kids is called Mightier. And the main difference between us and Mightier is that they really market towards kids, the IEPs and 504 plans, and kids like specifically with like anxiety, and it's like they sell pretty much directly to parents. So it's very one-on-one. You get a coach, whereas we're trying to create a whole platform of games that can be put in curriculum for schools, general audience, any kid across the board. You know, not put this connotation on it that it's for kids that can't perform under stress. It's just for kids that just for kids.
Did you guys think of just like sending an app out into the world just to have people download it and play it, or has it always kind of been this targeted approach? We
played with that idea. And did it for a handful of reasons. One, we think we can make the most impact in schools. And I also don't think we could sustain that business model. What are the other reasons we didn't just put it out in the App Store? Just looking at...
Well, no, I mean, it's like going back to what we said originally. I mean, that probably ultimately will be something we'll do, but it's being focused on one pathway at the moment. And like, that's a whole different marketing approach if we were just to put it out there and have like an individual, like we have a plan in place and a pricing point set for someone just to buy it at home already, but because ultimately we expect parents will come to us once they see their kids are playing it in schools and say, hey, can we buy this?
Yeah.
And it will be on the App Store. You know, you will be able to go to the Play Store and App Store and download it.
But the marketing is going to be entirely different.
Well, sure, it's a different,
sales approach is entirely different. So
you're not bundling them.
And in a few years down the road, certainly that'll be a way that we'll go about it. But for now, we are doing everything we can to sell schools.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what are your challenges, I guess, because you kind of talked about kind of where you're at now. Like, let's say challenges within the next year, challenges within the next, I guess, 5 years if you want to go that far. But like pertaining to anything, your company, the industry, it's unique. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Teach me.
Well, so it's funny because we're already on like the topic of what our biggest challenge is. It's
Yeah.
convincing people that schools are the right way to go about this. Like every time we have an investor meeting or we're pitching for a grant, it's don't sell schools. Like that has historically been
We say
so
sell schools, and they're like,
difficult. And we have to overcome them. Like we can sell to schools. Like there is a need right now because of the new learning domain, and schools are like seeking solutions. We are early on, and we're already having meetings with superintendents, and there is a budget being set aside for this. There are grants being given to schools right now to purchase things like SeeLife. So there is an opportunity for us to actually sell to schools. So when people say, like, that's not going to happen, I mean, I get it. I know that historically it's been really, really, really tough to sell to schools, but I really feel like we're in, like, the perfect spot timing-wise to make this happen in that market.
Well, I mean, you chose selling to schools as the lane you're going to go in for a reason. Do you believe that's the path of least resistance, or do you believe that's the most fruitful path to start with?
Fruitful path to start.
Okay.
There's been a lot of resistance.
Okay.
So honestly, that's our biggest challenge when it comes to raising money right now. Investors are very hesitant to sell to somebody who's trying to sell to schools.
And to be clear, the biggest challenge isn't selling to schools. The biggest challenge is convincing people that it's not a challenge to sell to schools, if that makes sense.
So you're in this funding stage, and in this funding stage, you go to investors and you say, "This is our business plan. This is what our business does. This is who we sell to." And it's at that point where they're like, "You sell to schools. Maybe I won't invest into you, but if they don't invest in you, then you can't show them that you are selling to schools."
Right.
Pretty much, yeah.
But what's unique about the situation is the new learning domain and this cultural shift, and right now, which is why time's of the essence. So if we get this thing out there right now, selling to schools is not an issue. Whereas any other time or year, it probably would be really, really hard and wouldn't be something you'd want to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a hypothesis too. I mean, I feel like down the road, it's still going to be easy. Like now that there is such an emphasis placed on social emotional learning and providing something that's measurable for that, schools are kind of eating it up. And honestly, like, the country's not where we were 20 years ago. You talk about meditation now, and not everybody sort of understands the benefits of that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because that's the one kind of link I know to this. And there's meditation studios popping up everywhere, right? And that's new. That's like 2 years old, at least from my eyes.
Right. And even in
government.
government.
You don't see any kids in them.
Yeah, you're seeing it in government too. Like Tim Ryan has implemented like mindfulness rooms in Washington now.
Okay.
And we spoke to his office recently, and they were really excited about it. And it's everywhere. I mean, everywhere you look, people are beginning to understand the benefits of like calming your mind.
Yeah.
You're seeing schools swapped attention for meditation.
Yeah.
You're seeing these things called mindful music moments, which is a program in collaboration with, I think it's don't quote me on this, the Cleveland Orchestra maybe, or Cleveland Institute of Music. And in elementary schools, they'll play classical music over the announcements for like 3 minutes every morning. And they say the improvements in classroom behavior has been phenomenal. And they're like, that's just 3 minutes of just like listening to classical music before you start your day. That's amazing. And just all of these little things, and really focusing on the whole child. It's not just how good are you at math and science and how well can you read. It's how emotionally intelligent are you at a young age.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, everyone's like, wow, school's not really, teaching any soft skills. And I think that's kind of been that fundamental shift.
Yeah.
How tough is it for you guys to get data from like what works with students? Because I'm not, I guess, again, not being in that space, I had never heard of the, Institute of Music or somebody playing classical music. What kind of person drives that? And in your case, how do you get data to kind of justify, hey, kids are, having these problems focusing, this is the answer to it, and here's data that backs it up? Where are you getting that data, and is that easy to kind of start new studies?
I feel like that's sort of stems from validating the problem initially when you were going through iCorp. So like talking to a lot of different teachers. And,
A lot of it's analytical.
Okay.
They do like annual surveys, and it's not very quantitative.
Okay.
But SeeLife would be able to provide quantitative data, and that quantitative data would be along the lines of, you know, how long are you able to keep a resting heart rate? And more importantly, how quickly are you able to return to a resting heart rate if you have a rise? And just things like that, and that it's what biofeedback does. And if you look up clinical studies for biofeedback, those things are tracked, and those outcomes do show a direct correlation between just overall performance in daily life and your ability to perform these biofeedback games. So taking that data and superimposing it theoretically on a classroom in conjunction with the analytics they've been gathering just from teacher surveys, student surveys annually, you can kind of predict that this will make an impact.
Yeah, that answers it, because like sometimes when people are talking about, you know, we have this study, we have that study, I was wondering if, so these studies have already kind of been out there, or at least the problem's already been identified, and you're just leaning on that. You guys don't have to go out there and then have people fill out your surveys per se. So that probably helps.
We don't have to prove that biofeedback works. That was done in like the 60s. Like, that's been around. That's a proven science.
And this is an extension of that and a new application for that.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of studies recently proving that if you gamify biofeedback, it's also extremely effective. So, I mean, that's something that we're also seeing more and more and more recently.
We're not trying to prove anything. We're just using our background in gaming and, you know, educational game design and art and science to make a better one.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. The problems there you're resolving. That's the same way, you know, I don't have to go around proving that people get hacked. Like I say, you it's there. I provide a solution to prevent it, you know. But nobody's being like, I don't think people get hacked, right?
No.
So you don't have anyone saying biohacking, or not biohacking,
biofeedback.
Biofeedback. You can call it biohacking, I guess.
I mix cybersecurity in with it. You're not trying to convince people biofeedback is a real thing that people need to focus on. Schools are even aware of that. So.
Yeah. Occasionally, people are like, what?
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's that many people that are familiar with biofeedback in schools, but yeah, proving that it's a real thing is easy.
But you have data just to lean back on and say, listen, you know, here's this issue you might be facing. So you guys are looking at K through 12 primarily then?
Yeah.
To clear? Okay.
Starting with K to 5.
K to 5.
And then expansion in like 2021 to middle schoolers, high schoolers, even adults.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess expanding on that, I mean, the reason that we're focusing on young kids in the early stages of this is there's not many options out there for them to have effective biofeedback. And additionally, I mean, you know, kids are like sponges.
Sure.
So if you teach them something early in life, they'll have it for the rest of their lives, and probably it'll be a skill that they'll acquire better than the rest of us, to be honest. It's kind of like learning a language.
Sure.
So if they're able to like face any situation and have their heart rate autonomically controlled and not be inhibited by like a stressful situation, you know, hopefully like that next generation will be better than the rest.
Well, and it also speaks to kind of your personal experiences, right? That you guys went through it when you guys were younger too.
But we went through it for brainwaves, not for heart rate. So not to say that I am any better at anyone else at public speaking because I don't get nervous. Like I didn't practice that. I know how powerful biofeedback is because I figured out how to control my brainwaves. I have practiced other ways in in the past few years, just knowing the importance of how to overcome a stressful situation, how to calm down and face your nerves, not through professional biofeedback other than, playing like Nevermind game and like the other games on the market and things. So I understand that learning how to control your heart rate is important, but I don't think that we can honestly say that the biofeedback we did as kids made us know how to control our heart rate.
Yeah,
but
it
made us understand.
Yeah, but still, that's kind of what led you to the thesis, at least, right?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Yes, it did lead there. Yeah.
Although this is another misconception that is, I think, worth sort of bringing up, because everybody sort of says, "Oh, this is going to be great for that kid with ADD or ADHD," and I understand why they're landing there, because we're saying, this is going to help kids take tests. Imagine if a kid is really, really smart, knows the material, and sits down to take a test, and then struggles just because they're bad at test taking. Well, the same thing happens with somebody with ADHD as somebody who is just really nervous, but what's actually happening in their brain is two different things. So, like, if you're stressed, you sit down and you just sort of forget what it is that you studied.
Heart rate goes up,
You
face
know?
gets red, like you're like just
Yeah, when
scared.
you go in for like a big interview, a lot of the times you're just like, you prepared for it, and all of a sudden you just sort of freak out and you don't know what to say. Well, the kid with ADHD, he's sitting there reading the question, and then midway through the question, he's thinking about what he had for breakfast, because his brain waves are just all over the place.
Sure. And this
So
is heart.
So yeah, it's like the same thing when you're from the outside looking in, but it's two different problems that are causing that.
So, I mean, that brings me to kind of SeeLife as a company, taking away kind of who you're marketing towards as a product. What's the next step of the product? Is the product to expand around heart rate monitoring solutions or heart rate control solutions, or do you want to produce a product that maybe plays on brainwaves?
I think focusing more on heart rate. Down the line, it's nothing. Not to say you couldn't take the same level and just kind of reprogram it so that it's based on brainwaves versus heart rate.
You need a different apparatus, though, right? Because the heart rate's easy with Fitbit. You can't really put a Fitbit.
Sure, I mean, it would have to be done in a clinical setting.
Yeah.
So, like, if you could take the game and just
Yeah.
have somebody sit down in an office somewhere where they already have
Yeah, so if
everything
hospitals
they
wanted
need.
to buy it,
Yeah.
great, come talk to us. You
Okay,
know, once
yeah,
we've
yeah.
proven the game and it's
Yeah.
fun and proven that engagement, like we would love to do that. But we're not doctors. We're not running clinical trials. We're doing heart rate because you
Sure.
don't need to.
Just so many people can benefit from it too. And so
Yeah.
it's the more people or more audiences I think that we eventually want to target down the line. It's still heart rate. It really is. Because even people that are struggling, and when they have that misconception, it's the kid with ADD or whatever. Those kids could still obviously benefit from heart rate control as well. It's just slightly different. But
Yeah. So as like a startup, you guys just went through an accelerator program. You guys are still looking for funding. What do you think? Do you think you're gonna stay in? I guess the Midwest is kind of where I'm going with. Do you think you guys are gonna
Straight to Silicon Valley.
Right. Well, what is your view on the startup scene in Ohio? What is your view on the startup scene elsewhere? What do you think's right for you guys?
We love it here.
Yeah.
I love the Midwest. I think the Cleveland-Akron area has been amazing for us. You know, we have had so much visibility here and so much guidance because the mentors we have through Jumpstart and YBI, and just finished up the accelerator at the Bounce Hub, which was amazing. The traction we gained and the things we learned that we didn't know we had to learn, and the access to all the mentors and all of these different viewpoints are just so great. And it's such a tight-knit community that every time we go to any event at the Bounce Hub or at Jumpstart, we're not only meeting new people, but I feel like we know more and more and more people every time we go. It's the same faces, and it's always growing. The Start and Clee dinners have been a really great networking experience. I just think that not only do we have a lot of support here in Northeast Ohio from our mentors, and we got Glide too. I don't know, we haven't mentioned that yet, from the Innovation Fund. And so between the investment support and mentor support and Ohio being a leader in the SEL movement, this is just the right place to be.
Okay.
Yeah, despite popular belief, if everybody thinking like the Midwest is not where you want to be for a tech startup, we're actually seeing kind of the opposite. We're getting a lot of support from.
Do you think that's specific to what you guys are doing, or do you think that's specific to any? There's not specific, and it would work for any startup.
I think that there's a lot of momentum here. I mean, there's a lot of people actively trying to make the community better for startups. Certainly, we just saw it by going through the accelerator we just went through. I mean, it was the first time that they had this accelerator program, and a lot of the mentors are coming out of the woodwork doing what they can to help startups in this area. And in fact, we were just contacted by Venture for America, is that right? Because they're trying to set up an office over here in the Cleveland area as well. I mean, it seems like there really is sort of a movement happening here as well. Despite
Plug and Play came, Venture for America's here. There's a lot coming
Well,
to
Aspire.
Aspire's here. I forgot about that. When California burns down, we have the Great Lakes, so we're in that
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly a better scene
Yeah.
out in Silicon Valley still, but I feel like a lot of people think that there's just nothing here.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that people think there's nothing here, but there's some people that definitely get frustrated, especially when they look at especially funding habits, right, and the differences. And there's also, the New York vibe is completely different than the West Coast vibe. So it's just kind of, I'm always interested to see where the startup founders' heads are at there, because I've interviewed Dave Akash, who's in Silicon Valley, who's doing Spot Me. I've talked to some people out at the Techstars in Boston. I've talked to several people that came out of the Bounce Hub now, and everyone. Let's say if I've talked to 10 people, I've had 10 different opinions on what's right for startups. So it's hard to gauge that. But as this has kind of become a series on looking at startups when I'm interviewing these companies, it's interesting to see where their heads are at and what's right with them.
Yeah.
But what's right for SeeLife right now is staying in the Cleveland area, planting your roots here, getting your resources through accelerators, through
we have a lot of momentum. We have a letter of intent from the superintendent of the Geauga County Educational Service Center saying that they would strongly consider putting SeeLife in their elementary schools, which is 13 districts. There's just so much, and the way these educational service centers work is it's really a domino effect with schools and everyone wanting to be innovative, and with the SEL learning domain coming out and SeeLife being an innovative technology solution for that domain, and us being here in a leading spot, and then having the domino effect of not only the different counties around Northeast Ohio, but then the other states following Ohio. It just seems like for us it's a great place to be, and have had a lot of support with the incubators and accelerators and local funding. We are raising a seed round, and we have the Innovation Fund to help us get going, and it's helped us build our MVP and do the preliminary testing. And now we're looking for our lead investor to help us build out SeeLife 1.0 to get to our next inflection point and have a product that we can sell to schools. And not this coming year, but the following school year.
All right, so that kind of brings me into my next question, and that might have been the answer, but if there's one thing that you can ask people for that might be listening to this, what would that thing be? Funding, money. Money.
Sure.
Yes. Is there any groups you're trying to get a hold of? Is there anything like that, or is it right now like the next step is just very clearly we need funding? We know who we're selling to. We know what we're building.
Well, we have 3 main asks. The first one is connections to academic leadership. We're trying to learn as much as we can about SEL and conversely teach people what we can measure and what we have to provide. Okay. So especially at the state level. So we've been in touch with Tim Ryan's office, but now that he's running for president and stuff, is a little busy to talk to.
It happens.
So
maybe he'll come around.
Yeah, maybe he'll call us soon. So academic leadership, and then we are looking to fill the role for development. Right now we've been contracting out our development services for the programming for the MVP, but that role is open, so if there's anyone who's looking for the opportunity to join a high potential startup at an early stage, we are looking to talk to Unity programmers with a game design background. And then the third is that we are raising a seed round and looking for our lead investor.
Okay. Yeah. And kind of as I'm gearing towards my wrap up, what else do you guys want to plug? Anything that you guys want to reference?
I feel like throughout this we've already sort of plugged all the
things
that we really wanted to.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to come down, talk to me kind of about what you have. What we're probably going to do is add this into a kind of a catalog of startups, and then I'd like to talk to you guys in like a year from now or maybe 6 months from now, just to kind of see where you're at, how expectation levels might have switched, and go from there. So, like I said, really appreciate you guys coming on. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.